Greetings, friends, and welcome to the Victory Hour here on YouTube, brought to you by Lord's people at Clavel Assembly in Foster, Rhode Island. You can contact me, email info@clavelassembly.com, or you can write to me, the Victory Hour, P.O. Box 222, Foster, Rhode Island, 02825, or Clavel Assembly, P.O. Box 222, Foster, Rhode Island, 02825. Happy to hear from you, help you. Spiritual counsel, questions you may ask that are on your mind, go ahead, and more than happy to do that. All right, Jim Gallagher here. And so what I want to do is I want to get to dispensationalism. I told you I was going to enter into the subject of dispensationalism and the era of the pre-tribulational rapture system of eschatology and all the associated, not all, but some of the associated doctrines that are the natural fallout of that system, to show you the great era that most churches are in today, because most churches have embraced, most conservative Bible-believing churches have embraced this false doctrine, and it has a real limiting effect on our capacity to receive so many of the blessed truths in God's Word. I've got to show it to you, the horrible nature of this system of thought. And I want to do it, but I still haven't found my Schofield Reference Bible. I never bought one. Someone gave that to me. I didn't have to spend a dime for it. I don't want to spend money for a Schofield Reference Bible if I don't have to, because I don't believe in the Schofield system. It has made mincemeat of the New Testament, and I want to show you that. So, I've got to get my hands on one. If anybody has an old Schofield Bible, not the new, the one that they updated the notes on, like in 1960-something, not that one, the original Schofield Bible with the original notes. I want that. I need that. If I don't get one, I'm just going to have to go out and, well, maybe I can get a used one on Amazon or something. I haven't even tried looking. I'll have to do that. I'll try searching my office one more time. It seems like it should be in here. I don't know where it went. But at any rate, we will get to that. But I want to do something first, just as a break from that subject. I want to talk about Ukraine. But not Ukraine today. What's going on in Ukraine today with Russia and Ukraine is ridiculous. It's part of a New World Order globalist plan to get us involved in another international affair, to drive the scenario in the way the globalists want, to forward the cause of weakening America and strengthening the international movement of Marxism, fascism, the whole New World Order woke system of the Great Reset, which is anti-American and anti-Christian. But what I want to talk about is what happened in the Ukraine in the early 30s under Joseph Stalin. Why do you want to do that? I'll tell you why. Let's go to 2 Timothy chapter 3. And I was quoting this the other day. I can't remember the occasion, but it seems like I was, unless I was just thinking of it and never did it. But I think I was. 2 Timothy chapter 3. It's just a powerful verse that has legs, and the application of the principle you can find in so many avenues of life. And that's why I'm using it again. The Apostle Paul writes in verse 13 of 2 Timothy chapter 3, "But evil men and seducers shall wax worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived." Now, this tells us how the world operates, really. But evil men and seducers. Now, these evil men seduce people. They're liars. Have you ever seen, presidents lie. But have you ever seen someone lie more and in our face with no shame, without stopping, than the current president we have? Joe Biden cannot tell the truth. I know I keep saying that, but it's true. He can't tell the truth. We have a huckster as a president. I don't mean to be unkind or disrespectful, but it's true. And John the Baptist said to Herod, you shouldn't have your brother Philip's wife. Oh, John was preaching politics. He was wrong to do so. No, we're wrong not to. Besides, we're not in the business of preaching politics. We're in the business of preaching Christ and holding that up to the lens of anti-Christian thought, which is what I'm doing. We're talking about the difference between right and wrong. Now, I think Christian ministers should be willing to do that. But Paul says here that evil men and seducers, those that seduce other people, obviously they're manipulating other people for their own advantage, which ultimately always seems to be power and control, right? That is the history of the world. But evil men and seducers shall wax worse and worse, deceiving. Oh, they love to do that. But wait a minute, this is how bad it is. They wax worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. These evil men, with their manipulation and deception, tell lies so often they will begin to deceive themselves. They will begin to believe their own lies. They wax worse and worse, and certainly history bears that out. Now, when men like this rule over nations, what's the end result? Well, if we jump into the next chapter, and I'll just read one verse, and I'd love to read the context, but I want to get to my subject here. Paul writes, for I am now ready to be offered, and the time of my departure is at hand. I have fought a good fight. Let me read the next couple verses. I have finished my course. I have kept the faith. Henceforth there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, shall give me at that day, and not to me only, but unto all them also that love his appearing. So Paul was expecting to die soon. And indeed, Nero had him killed at the instigation of the Jewish leadership from Jerusalem. So when evil men and seducers have sway, they wax worse and worse, deceiving others, and then beginning to deceive themselves. And the net result is the righteous perish. Paul was ready to be offered up to death as a martyr for Christ. The one eventually leads to the other. That's kind of what my subject's about. Now, the other day, I think I read this for you. It's a quote from James Paul Warburg in 1950, before the subcommittee on the revision of the United Nations Charter. And this is what James Paul Warburg of the banking house of Warburgs from Germany, and he ended up moving from Germany, James Paul Warburg, Paul Warburg's son, to New York, and was married into Kuhn Loeb and Associates, and which is the financial institution in New York that helped fund the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. Yeah, these are the international bankers. We have them over here, and they're over there. And James Paul Warburg made this statement in Washington, D.C., in front of our own elected officials, talking about changing the charter of the UN. And he said, the past 15 years of my life have been devoted almost exclusively to studying the problem of world peace. Now, why does a banker spend 15 years of his life studying world peace? He's not a politician. Or is he? Well, whoever holds the purse strings has the power of the nation. Oh, you can believe that they have power with those that supposedly lead us. Anyway, he says, the past 15 years of my life have been devoted almost exclusively to studying the problem of world peace, and especially the relation of the United States to these problems. These studies led me, 10 years ago, to the conclusion that the great question of our time is not whether or not one world can be achieved, but whether or not one world can be achieved by peaceful means. This is the next sentence, his declaration, we shall have world government, whether or not we like it. The question is only whether world government will be achieved by consent or by conquest. Doesn't that explain woke Bank of America? Wells Fargo, Deutsche Bank in Germany, the Bank of England. Doesn't that explain the leftist, Marxist, Great Reset mindset of these bankers, these international bankers? Look, back in 1950, they were looking for one world, a Marxist, one world, no more nation states, bringing us all under a global government. Do you realize what that would do to this country? It's all about redistributing America's wealth, and it's happening fast and furious now. My opinion, we're on our last legs to hold on to our freedom. And he goes on to make this statement. Let me read this too. He says, Mr. Chairman, I'm here to testify in favor of Senate Resolution 56, which, if concurrently acted with the House, would make the peaceful transformation of the United Nations into a world federation the avowed aim of United States policy. In 1950, Ozzie and Harriet. So there's a revolution going on. Now, I read that because these people that are looking for global power, they mean business. And if they have to, they will kill. History bears that out. I have a book I want to bring to your attention. I got this book, let's see. It was years ago. 2002. A good brother Eric, gave me this book. It was from July 28th, 2002. And this book is something else. Days of Famine, Nights of Terror. Days of Famine, Nights of Terror, okay? First-hand accounts of Soviet collectivization, 1928 to 1934. Expanded second edition. It's edited and annotated by Leonid Leshuk. This book is about when the communists took over Russia through the Bolshevik Revolution. First you had Vladimir Lenin, leading the way up front. And then when he passed away, Joseph Stalin. Now, what we have here is the plan of Joseph Stalin to collectivize Russian farms, or Soviet farms. Now, he wants them to become from Russian to Soviet farms. Now, in the Ukraine was like the breadbasket of the Soviet Union. Ukraine had the most fertile ground in which to grow crops. It was the cream of the crop as far as farming goes in the Soviet Union. And back in the days of the Tsars, many German farmers moved to Russia because there was land available. And they were looking for more farmers. And, they could make a living for themselves. So they went there. Now, the Ukraine was very, very heavily populated with German farmers under the Tsars when Russia was still Russia. Then when the communists took over, well, I mean, they're still there. But when Joseph Stalin got into power, he had a bright idea. It really wasn't a bright idea, but he had an idea. And his idea was, we're going to collectivize the farms. And he felt that all these landowners of these farms, anybody that owned 5 acres or more, that's too much land to own. That's too much. And these people are just, they have their farms so they can, raise crops or cattle or whatever to supply for their family and their needs so that they can have income. And it's selfish. And it's inefficient, all these small farms. So what we need to do is collectivize all the farms and put them under the control and power of the state. And then we'll tell them what to do. And there'll be an efficiency in that. And we'll be able to better feed the people of the Soviet Union. We're going to take over the private farms. Besides, that's capitalism. And we got to put a stop to that. So they told all the farmers, you got to cough up your land and your business. And you can still farm the land, but you're just going to be tenants on your own property. And you're not going to be able to keep the goods that you raise. They're going to go out to the people of the Soviet Union. And we'll tell you how much you can keep for yourself just so you can live. And pretty much Stalin's plan worked this way. He raised the production requirements for each farm to such an arbitrarily high degree, no one was going to be able to keep it. And he allowed the actual workers of the farm to keep so little for survival they couldn't even survive on it. And plus, he was stealing their farms away from them that could have been in their homes for generations. Now, how do you think that's going to sit with those farmers, those German farmers? Not very well. They said, we're not going to do this. So Stalin came in and said, you will do it. And they say no. Then oftentimes the husbands might get sent to Siberia, or they'd just be killed. And the family would be booted out of the house, couldn't come back, couldn't partake of any of the fruit that comes from the ground of that farm, no means of livelihood. They were not allowed to leave the country. So no place to live, no way to earn money, no way to get food. And they starved to death. 4 million. 4 million. And this book is about that. Now, I want to read, first of all, I want can we trust the author of this book? So I went to the encyclopedia and looked up Leonid Leshuk, who's really the man who put the book together. I mean, because this book is, 90% of the book is just letters from farmers in the Ukraine and the surrounding areas there in the Soviet Union. But fundamentally Ukraine, because that was fertile ground, the breadbasket. And that's where the German population of farmers mainly were. And they were being killed, sent to Siberia, and starving to death. Their families, and their children. And while this butchery is going on, we're pretending it's, and when I say we, I mean the United States, is pretending it's not going on. We hid it. And we had reasons for doing that. And the deception started with the communists, but the deception continued on in our own government under the Marxist Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Yes, the Marxist Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Okay. I didn't get that much sleep last night. You have to excuse me. My tongue's tied. But let me read from the encyclopedia what it says about the man who put this book together. And by the way, this book was his doctoral thesis. And let me give you a little bit of the bio. Leonid Leshuk is an American historian specializing in Soviet issues. In 2002, Leonid Leshuk published U.S. Intelligence Perceptions of Soviet Power, 1921 to 1946. That is the name of the book he put out and published. A study called Unique and Groundbreaking Work, dedicated to the perception of the Soviet Union by American intelligence, the secret services from 1921 to 1946. In other words, what the United States intelligence perceived and understood about the true nature of the Soviets in that time frame. Based on old classified U.S. documents, Dr. Leshuk has been particularly interested in assessing the information in the possession of the secret services and the resulting perception. He thus pointed to incompetence and complacency that led American governments to profoundly underestimate the economic, military, and political conditions of the Soviet Union, just like we're doing now with Communist China, under this corrupt administration which has been compromised and sold out to the communists in China, not to mention the corrupt government in Ukraine today. History repeats itself. They're doing it to us again. Okay. The genocide in Ukraine, or Holodomor. In 2003, let me jump down a little bit later. Talking about the Soviet collectivization of the farms. The November 13th, 2003 Kinnan Institute, the Ukrainian Embassy in the United States, the Ukrainian Congress Committee of America, and the U.S.-Ukraine Foundation participated in a conference to examine the new information available on the Ukrainian famine. This is in 2003. Because we were kind of in denial that any bad things was happening over there. The international reaction, and they were looking at studying the international reaction to this tragedy, the criteria that make it a genocide. So they're also studying what is the proper criteria to evaluate and declare something a genocide. And what was going on? And this is in 2003. Speaker Paula Gabriensky, Undersecretary for Global Affairs, U.S. Department of State, said then, in 2003, quote, "Every year we learn more and more about the famine in Ukraine, and yet it is still difficult to grasp the enormity of the tragedy in what was the breadbasket of the USSR. Millions of men and women were literally condemned to starve to death." That's the Undersecretary of Global Affairs in the U.S. Department of State. Leonid Leshuk participated in the second debate, we're told, of the conference, which concerned the international reaction of the time when it was happening. Leshuk and Eugene Fischel of the U.S. State Department agreed that there were accurate international press reports of this organized famine, including those of British journalists of the time, such as Malcolm Muggeridge and Gareth Jones. These testimonials were largely brushed aside by positive media coverage of the Soviet Union, by journalists seeking favors from the Soviet government. The most famous example of that is of journalist Walter Duranty of the New York Times, yeah, it figures, who denied the famine and received the Pulitzer Prize in 1932 for his reporting on the Soviet Union. Evil men and seducers shall wax worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. How did it affect Paul? He said, "I'm now ready to be offered. My departure is at hand." And he means, it's curtains for me. We're told, I'm reading from the encyclopedia, at that time the American government, as well as other Western governments, considered the Ukrainian famine an internal affair of the USSR. Moreover, the United States, in the midst of the Great Depression, could not jeopardize their diplomatic trade relations with the huge Soviet market. Oh, we got to make some money. So let those German farmers die. Now, the book, Days of Famine, Nights of Terror, First-hand accounts of Soviet collectivization, 1928 to 1934, by Leonid Leshuk. Now, there's some things I want to read here, and I've only got so much time here. Let me start with this. This is, well, I guess you consider, it's the first chapter or the introduction. It's a foreword. Anyway, the author writes this: there was an effort in Germany, and to a lesser extent in some of the other Central and Eastern European countries, on the part of anti-communist governments and political parties to make the public aware of what was taking place in the USSR. Back then, they were trying to get the world to see the slaughter that was taking place by the communists. Although much of the same information, as well as additional and unique reports, had been obtained by the intelligence gathering branches of the United States government. In other words, they knew about this. The events described were initially discounted as being of little consequence, and in some cases intentionally ignored. I mean, Joe Biden's running around in Ukraine. The president's running around Ukraine looking like he's having a gay all the time with Zelensky. It was Biden and his son made money off that corrupt government, and now he's over there schmoozing with them and sending billions of our dollars for their war effort that's going to do nothing for us. It's payback time. They've made a lot of money. This is so corrupt. And now, if that was Donald Trump and his son made money, and then as president, he went over there and started pouring billions of dollars in there, oh boy, you would never hear the end of it on every single news broadcast. Who even raises this question about what Biden's doing in Ukraine now? In relation to his son and the money they made. It is unbelievable. So that information that we had of what was going on was discounted as being of little consequence, and in some cases, intentionally ignored. Soon, however, such information was intentionally suppressed by Franklin Roosevelt and those in his administration who believed they could gain political advantage from the diplomatic recognition of the Soviet, may I add, communist government. Roosevelt wanted to recognize the communist takeover of Tsarist Russia and legitimize it, and he didn't care if he was slaughtering German farmers. There's politics to be played. Now look, I'm out of time. When we come back on Thursday, I'll pick up where I left off here in this book and read you a couple of the contextual statements. Then I want to begin to read for you some of the letters that were being sent out by these German farmers asking for help, so you understand what it was we were turning our backs on. Every man has to stand before the Lord and give an account for the deeds done in his body. And that includes our government then and our government now. Well, look, I got to go. Our time is up together. This is Jim Gallagher, reminding you in the words of our blessed Lord and Savior, Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free.